Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited today to welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, all the way from about 10 minutes drive from where I am right now in Geelong, Australia, Sue Wong, who's the co-founder and coach at My Manifesto. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast. Sue, it's a real privilege to have a chat with you.
Thank you so much, Jürgen. The privilege is mine. I'm very excited to be my first podcast, Jürgen, with you. So looking forward to this experience.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure there'll be many more podcasts, and hopefully this will set a very high standard for those other ones to live up to.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, your business, My Manifesto, is fairly new. It exists to bring the gifts of clarity, focus, and inspiration to people that enable them to uncover and express what's important in their lives and in enabling them to actually live an authentic life. So I'm really interested to find out more about that and curious about so many things related to that. Before we start chatting about those things, what's the impact you're making in the world today, Sue?
Well, Jürgen, I'd love to be making more impact. You're absolutely right. Justin Robinson and I have begun this business, and we strongly believe in what we're offering. And it's opportunities like today to let people know what we're offering that will, I hope, produce a ripple effect, we're hoping, whether word of mouth, someone does have an experience with us, and I'll explain that as we get going, what's involved, and then that they enjoy it enough. And we have had lovely feedback from those who have done the work with us, to tell others about it, so that we would love to have the effect of a community of people who feel they are consciously and intentionally living the life they intend to lead.
Yeah, and I love how you emphasize having fun with the process.
Absolutely, Jürgen. That's something I've had to learn. You know, I've come from a teaching background, and earnestness was a word that got associated with it. And, you know, I don't mind that word, but I've got to have a few light and shade in my character and as Justin put it, Sue, just be playful with it, Sue. And that releasing statement when we first began, and I was writing blogs and things, and, you know, my background is literature and English, and thinking I have to write like those greats. For him to say, look, just be playful with it, release something in me, Jürgen. And I thought, you know, as a conversation, have it on the page, have it person to person, but go lightly.
So how did a literature teacher that, as you've said yourself, might have been a little bit on the earnest side, get into this playful space and get into the coaching space with, personal coaching, I guess, lifestyle coaching, if you call it that?
Yeah, it is an interesting one, Jürgen. I have had a full teaching career of some 46 years. I'm now stepped out of the classroom. I retired, and I think COVID was the thing that made me go, well, I think the way I taught and what I know as teaching has changed a great deal. Although, look at the irony of that. The skills I had to pick up and learn, I'm using right here and right now. So nothing is wasted. However, as I was getting towards the latter end of my teaching career, I was at Geelong Grammar Corio School, and Justin Robinson was there too as the head of the Positive Education Institute, and he had been that for some 10 years. I was getting to a point where I thought I'd like to diversify a little. Coaching was something that I'd taken on board some years ago in my brother's company. Actually, he had a clothing company, and he said, Susie, would you come in and work with my staff, coach my managers? And I thought, well, I'll come out of teaching for a bit, and I did. I came out for about 4 or 5 years and became his national manager and traveled up the coast and worked with his teams, and thought, I'm having a glorious playful role-playing action here, which is not at all like my classroom. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. But then I thought, you know what, I want to go back into teaching. I hadn't quite finished the arc of my teaching career. But how about I take coaching back with me? And so that model I'd had with my brother was a workplace and business coaching. I then did some additional training, which was educational leadership and growth coaching, and added that to my little portfolio. And so here I was back at Geelong Grammar at that point, come in through sessional teaching and then worked my way into the English classroom and then into literature, and rather boldly would stand up in the common room and say to my colleagues, teaching staff and all of the staff of the school, who would like to be coached by myself? Or at that point, I had 9 other coaches who wanted to go on this ride with me. They'd done the training too. And Justin was one of those who put his hand up. And as it turned out, we found we had this amazing synergy, this commonality of spirit and an ease of connection that after a time, I coached him over a 1.5 year period, every 2 weeks. He said, Sue, I don't have to come along to these coaching sessions, but I love them so much. And I said, well, mate, it's a win-win because I have a spring in the step for the rest of my day. Fast forward, Jürgen, it was time for me to retire from the classroom. And just before I left, I thought, I think I'll pass on my contact address and so on, phone number and so on, to several of the wonderful people that I've worked with here, just in case anything might come up. And sure enough, Justin got in contact and said, Sue, I'm thinking of winding up my teaching career, if you like, and starting a business. I've always wanted to do a business in well-being because he'd had all those years in the Institute and he'd worked with Martin Seligman at Geelong Grammar and developed a wonderful positive psychology course. He said, I'm thinking I'd like to start my own. And would you like to come into business with me? And here we are, I'm approaching 70 years of age and going, free go. But I said, Sue, live your story. Say yes, and then say, what does that actually involve as it evolves? And so, Jürgen, long answer, isn't it? But the end is we spent the next 15 months developing My Manifesto together. And that was the first stage of our journey.
Fascinating. I'll come back to the manifesto bit in a moment. What I'm curious about in listening to that story is how you talked earlier about finding some more fun in your life and that you were perhaps very earnest as a teacher. How did you find going into that different role as a coach, first of all, in the corporate world in your brother's company, and then when you took on coaching at the school, which I'm guessing you kind of did pro bono simply as gathering experience?
Yes, I did.
So how did you find, was that liberating for you that then enabled you to kind of be more playful and have fun and try things out that maybe could go wrong?
Thank you for that wonderful question. I love it. When I was with the coaching team, I said to them, coaching and teaching, they're 2 different paradigms. Teaching is that instructor. I mean, I don't have to be, but they have tended to be. Teaching has been the instructor. You're the repository of knowledge. You are teaching the people in front of you, enabling them to take on learning. But essentially, there is a hierarchy and a power difference in what is known. Coaching is the reverse, if you like. It is bringing forth from the person you're coaching what they know, perhaps applying some strategies to that. But essentially, you're listening. And for Sue, you can already gather, you and the listeners, that I am very verbal. And to listen. And then I challenged myself to Jürgen and my team. I said, we have some modeling in our coaching training, but let's try to be as organic as possible. Let's listen to the response because it's a question-based thing, coaching. It's not a telling, it's an asking. Ask the question, wait for the answer, and you'll chuckle, Jürgen. I used to put on the top of my page, wait. Why am I talking? My little acronym to self. And that was, when you hear the response, Sue, really listen to it and ask the next thing that occurs to you, just like you've done, something you're curious about, and listen to that answer. In my head, I had some modeling of where this was going and what point I might like to reach throughout the session. But largely the challenge was allow it to evolve and really be present with the person. You need to really listen. Use the modeling structure of affirming what you hear. I'm impressed with the fact that I've heard you say this, Jürgen. That was a wonderful question. Thank you. That sort of thing. And then paraphrase. Am I right in saying that this is very important to you, that type of response, which would be validated or affirmed by the person being coached, and then I'd have my next little step for the next bit. I had a shape for it, but what I'd say that to my team was, it's like flicking a switch. And yes, you're right, I did do it pro bono, and I did do it in those spare periods between classes and in my breaks and so on, when they coincided with the other teacher was doing it also in their time. So we'd get together and we'd find a space, and I'd say I'd flick the switch and become the coach in this session. And yes, I had to be authentic. I had to be genuine, and really, luckily, the curiosity was within me to find out more about that person. And that was liberating, yes.
And on that journey, did you find out more about yourself?
Ha, ha, ha. Again, beautiful. You've got certainly great coaching style yourself, Jürgen. I did, didn't I? I did find out more about that earnestness. I also found out that in listening, I could learn and grow. And I did take back to my classroom the coaching method. Enough of the talking at. If you've done that in the past, Sue, and I suggest you probably have, and they've been too polite to say, okay, you actually can ask the questions and enable them to contribute what they know. And that made for a really satisfying and collaborative experience for me.
Excellent. Now, I just screw up my face there, so if people are watching the video, that's because the connection got interrupted there, but I sort of hung on for a moment because I thought, I'm sure Sue will be back, and here you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw that, Jürgen, and largely it's audio, so we'll probably be fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine. It's just my expression will suddenly have changed there, and people might be watching and wondering, what did Sue say to make Jürgen look like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I did want to touch on My Manifesto and the idea of why choose the word manifesto. Is there a difference between a manifesto and what others might call a personal vision statement or mission statement, or what else is out there in the coaching world? Those sort of things. And I've heard people describe the process without giving it a name. So, talk to me about My Manifesto. What's the difference, if there is any, and what makes it unique?
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen. It's largely a naming thing. We call it personal manifesto, and I think that personal is important. It has been used in many contexts, political contexts too. We are calling a personal manifesto a private declaration of wisdom, aims and intentions, is a formal statement. For our purposes, our working statement is a personal manifesto. Who am I? What do I stand for? And what is the life I intend to lead? So those 3 steps we elicit from the person, because we are firmly of the belief that knowing yourself and the person knowing themselves is the best arbiter of their wisdom, rather than the telling that may be done. Or in fact, in some of the vision statements that are produced perhaps in a business context, someone inputting a vision or giving a vision to an organization, it may not have quite arisen from every one of those people within the organization. Whereas what we do personally, and I'll talk about that later, Jürgen, when we get an opportunity, our business iteration now, is the person themselves or the persons themselves, given the wider context of the business. We design some steps to bring forward what are their strengths, what's important, what matters to them. When are they strongest and feeling most energized? What are they doing in a work context or in a personal context that we can help in the case of when we're doing the one-to-one, and we'll get to the book stage. They can do it themselves through our exercises. What are those things that they can put down in a way that lifts and energizes them to be that self in that way, intentionally in their lives? So that is our point of difference, if you like.
Okay. There's so much you said there that kind of triggered things in my mind. One of the things that struck me right from the get-go, and as I was going through the information you gave me before the show, is this idea of starting off, because a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to set a vision statement and I want to do this and I want to achieve that and I want to get this to this career and I want to travel and I want to earn $1 million and whatever it might be. So they get all this. But the difference in what you're doing is you start off with, hang on, who am I? What am I about? And what are my values? And so on. And I was privileged enough to hear a keynote presentation in person last week from Ben Crow, who was the mindset coach for Dylan Alcott, for Ash Barty, for Steph Gilmore, and he was quite amazing. But his process is very much the same. Start off with who you are, and he was very strong about pointing out that people usually start off with what do I want and how do I get there, as opposed to, well, let's start off with who am I. And he talked a lot about focusing on being, and you raised this also, be, what do I want to be? So focus on a human being rather than a human doing. And he brought up the idea, which I thought was brilliant, instead of having a to-do list, and I'm just looking around where my pad is that somebody gave me last week, which is a to-do list, have a to-be list. What do I want to be today? And I thought that's really brilliant. And I know Joe Clark, who we both know, who's my business coach, also talks about this whole concept of we're so busy doing that we forget about being, and it's called human being for a reason.
I love it.
So I love that. I love that. The question I guess I have is, people jump that step of who am I? And there are tools around like the Buckingham Strengths Finder and so on, which are kind of very analytical, and various personality tests that you can do. But they don't really tackle that who am I really, and when am I being my best, and how do I be like that more? So how do you go about eliciting that with the person you're coaching?
Yes, Jürgen, thank you. And of course, Ben Crow and Joe Clark, these people need no introduction in my world, very well known. And, you know, I feel an affinity with such people, as you say, with alignment. For us, because of Justin's background in particular in well-being and the work that he did through positive psychology and then positive education, we start off with the strengths work, Ryan Nemec's work, character strengths, which came out of, Cincinnati, and 24 character strengths that are universal to people. And we use the questionnaires, which they provide freely, for a person to put themselves through a series of questions. So step number 1 in our process is do this questionnaire, answer these questions in the moment as honestly as possible, and it will come up with what are your character strengths. We all have the 24, but we have them in different orders. And your top 5, they call them your signature strengths, are the ones that mostly are demonstrated by you in this moment. Keeping in mind, we call it stable and dynamic, that some of them stay stable for some time, others change according to life circumstance. So it's not a character profile or personality profile where you've done the test, that's you, this is your profile. It's in this moment, to these questions, in my life as it is today, I am showing these top 5 strengths, and right through to your supportive strengths and your strengths which you have at the bottom of your 24. You've still got them, but they're not resonating or showing as strongly as your top strengths. So then when the person gets their results back, they have an idea of, and it's really interesting because there's a thing called strengths blindness, where people are not really absolutely realizing that, for instance, courage might be one. One client said, I'm always called fierce, but now I've got the word courage and bravery for me. See how that lovely connotation alters the way a person sees themselves with that. And for my world of English and literature, of course, the language used is so important, can change the whole nature of that conversation. because clearly in the well-being world, we're wanting people to think as highly of themselves as possible and make the choices that cause them to flourish and grow. So we begin with their character strengths, Jürgen, and in our book, when we've put it into the book form, helps you do those steps. And then we go on to your values. So we look at the possible values that are also, and Justin's work again there's something like 150 or so values enumerated, and then you sift through and what are your top 5 values. And incidentally, in my own, because Justin and I both did all of this and road tested it, of course, before we put it out there. And one of my top 5 values is meaningful work. And you can see what could happen to a retired teacher who then went and thought, retirement, what is that? That is pleasing yourself and doing, very little of the stuff I've done for 46 years.
Sitting on the beach in the sun, yeah.
Sitting on the beach in the sun. I lasted 3 months. And when Justin rang...
Oh, you did well.
Thank you so much. Justin rang with this offer. I went, oh, yeah. And it was really only when I did the values work of identifying what is it that drives me that I thought, of course, Sue, meaningful work. So purpose and finding meaningful work. So those 2 steps are in our 7-step process already put the person in the mind of, who am I? And there may be some surprises, but of course it's come from their responses. So it is within them, but not quite at the conscious level. And that's a very important point I'd like to make. We feel people have within them their knowledge and their wisdom, but it's not always accessible.
It's not conscious, is it? And I know I've gone through a values exercise where I've come up with the same sort of thing, and it was the same aha feeling. Like I'm the sort of person that I can go on a beach holiday, but 5 minutes lying on the beach doing nothing is probably my boredom limit. I think I'm doing well if I've got 5 minutes. I need to do something.
Yes.
I need to be doing something meaningful, and I don't see that that's not meaningful to me.
No,
even though you can probably argue that there's a physical rest and recovery or recharging, but for me that's just not meaningful enough. And also, I mean, we have all this stuff inside of us, right?
Yes.
But it's often buried. And I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody talking about, in fact, it was a coaching conversation talking about that person pivoting their business and wondering about, the idea of imposter syndrome came up.
Oh, yeah.
Because they said, well, but I haven't done this bit. And people are looking for that. And I said, but you've done this and that and that.
Yes.
But that's easy. So, and isn't it true that we kind of are almost dismissive of the things that come natural to us, which comes back to perhaps the characteristics, and underestimate by a huge amount the value that could have for somebody else. And I know I suffer this all the time. It's easy for me to do it with somebody else and say to that person yesterday, hey, but you've done all this and that.
Yes.
And 99% of the population would say, wow, I pay a fortune to learn how you did that.
Yes.
So
it's interesting, isn't it? It's in our emotions colour our thinking, of course. When we're inside this body and we're not quite recognising the strengths that we talk about. And yes, we can be objective with others because our emotions are not all entangled there. And that's one thing. You do have that degree of separation in the coaching situation where you are there to be the lens, to be the reflector, to reflect back what you hear, so that the person then hears it again themselves. And that's that aha moment you spoke of. Now I see it that you have shown me, the mirror, if you like. It's hard to do that for ourselves.
Yeah. So let's say I have a manifesto.
Yeah.
I've written this on out. So what's next?
Yes, lovely question.
Because thinking in terms of the mission exercises that I always did in the corporate world, we'd get this massive get-together. Sometimes we'd fly to some resort somewhere. It would cost $100,000 to get everybody there. We'd have a fun time. We'd put this thing together. There'd be lots of play and stuff. and everybody went away excited. But then that
Yep.
document ended up in the drawer.
Yeah. Look, I totally recognize that. And so what's next is living your manifesto. When you've got your statement, I've got my current version behind me, Jürgen. Replenish, grow, share. In our pivot from the online and the face-to-face through the Zoom medium of coaching one-to-one to co-create a manifesto, that was the first iteration. And we did the pivot now to have written the book. And the book is a DIY version of our process. And so that is my current, we call it the current version because we're talking about that dynamic, that change that occurs. And so in doing the exercises throughout the 7 steps, you get what we call raw material. And you select from your raw material your current version. Now, mine is sitting behind me, Jürgen, for a good reason, because I want access to it. I have my full manifesto you can't quite see on this wall, is the one I did with Justin coaching me before we had a book with the steps nicely distilled and encapsulated in the book. It's there, and when I wake in the morning, there's 2 parts. At that point we had a declaration statement, and we had a wisdom statement. We've since put them together in our full statement in our book. But I have memorized my declaration, and still each morning as I wake, I know it, and before I put my foot on the floor, I have internally said my statement, which I have things like I wake with purpose and intent. I embrace calculated risk and adventure. I seek to support others through my wisdom and my experience. I seek to listen actively for my inner calm. I seek to see fully, to empower them to live their authentic lives. That's the middle section of my statement. I'm prepared. The foot hits the ground and I set away. And, there's that thing called synchronicity, which Carl Jung identified, and we have a local Dr. Chris Mackey, whose book I read on it, Synchronicity, which says that now I'm aware and alert to such things in my day, drops in all of these opportunities and moments where I recognize you're here, Sue. You're in it. Yep. And my latest reading on Ryan Holiday, and stillness is the key. I'm in the stillness, Jürgen. And so that reward, we've had it too. It's not just my account or Justin's. We've had it back from the people who've done this work, who say, oh, there I am. I'm in my life. And that is the reward that says, do more of this. Amplify this. Yeah. So that's a short answer to that question. But yes, living it, Jürgen, is certainly what you must do. And because it's come from you, there's every chance you're going to do that more than if you've had one given to you, or it's been given to you from the top down, etc.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started on that part. But again, what I'm hearing there is a lot of it comes back to the being part. Who do you need to be to actually live that? So you're talking about passing on wisdom, and that's clearly, it's not necessarily a to-do guide. Like, to do that, I've got to do these things today. It's like, what do I need to be? And then you talked about the opportunities that we automatically then recognize, because unconsciously we've primed our reticular activating system, like the red car, right? We buy a red car and then we see them everywhere. So we've primed that reticular activating system with those thoughts, and so we recognize them straight away, almost unconsciously.
Yeah, indeed.
So you've mentioned the book a couple of times. I think it's called A Gift to Yourself, right?
No, we actually have, that was a working title, Jürgen, and we're now calling it Complete Clarity.
Oh,
and
right.
This came organically out of what we did, road testing, we called it. We asked friends and community who are aware of what we were doing, would you road test the 7 steps for us? And when you do, will you be so kind as to share them with us? And then we in fact returned. We've got wonderful designers working with us on our team, excuse me, who put the manifesto in a visually appealing way and gave it back as a gift to them. And one of the road testers, complete clarity is what he came up with. And he said, I think that's what the book does. And so we said, well, you know, in the spirit of a book, the title should encapsulate what you're offering. We thought it was a better title.
Excellent. All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about Complete Clarity, and I believe it launches fairly soon.
Well, Jürgen, we're new to the world of publication as well.
Learning a lot there.
And this is the message I want to leave our listeners to from that first part of our talk is please be open to what's around you. Notice, you know, people who come, you're another person who's come into my life, Jürgen. You came into my life through an entirely different context, a club we're involved with, and then I found out you did this, and I asked you, and you accepted, yes, Sue, this would be lovely. So follow up and notice what's around you that piques your interest and follow it up. Be flexible and adaptive and follow through with what you want to do. Don't allow yourself to be discouraged by either yourself or those around you who might want to say, oh, no, you can't do that, or it's impossible to do that. So that's my first part. But the book itself, Complete Clarity, yes, we thought we're not reaching enough of the people we know would benefit from this book. Well, that's everyone. But we don't want to lock people out by things like the costing, because the coaching hours and so on, of course, they add up if you're trying to make a business out of it. But we thought Justin and I, servant leadership is firmly the way we choose to be. And so we want to empower others to use what we know is effective for themselves in a way that makes them empowered and independent. So we set about with the task of that process we've got online and the business, distilling it into what we call 7 steps, which are in the middle section of our Complete Clarity. The first section we call the priming. It's very much coaching and inspiration, getting the person ready. You know, you got their stuff that the coach does. Then 7 steps. And then the last section is called Living Your Manifesto, the beginning of the process that says, now you got it. How do I be that? And we're looking at a sequel, Jürgen. I think that's one of your questions perhaps later. But the sequel will be fully unfolding the life process of living your manifesto.
Yeah, and it's consistent with what you said earlier, right? The manifesto's got to be dynamic, so the process is probably going to be a little bit dynamic, and you can always enhance it and take it further.
Yes.
And obviously the idea of if you do something like this, that's great, but you have to take that and do something with it from there on.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yes, exactly. It's not going to sit on the shelf, to sit on the wall even. And we've had clients who've put it onto their wallpaper on their computer, Jürgen, have put it on their watch, have got an insertion in their diary. It's wherever it's your statement and wherever you think you might want it. And in instances where you might want it, where I'm heading myself for this experience and I just want to make sure I'm centered, then that's when you can access it. And that's living it, yes.
Excellent. I love it. All right. One of the thoughts I had as we were talking through some of this, and you brought it up in a couple of places, and it's around our own insecurities. You mentioned it in terms of the writing, even though I find it hard to imagine a literature teacher of some 40 years is insecure about the writing, but that's the old imposter syndrome, isn't it? So a lot of people are insecure about doing an exercise like this because they're scared of what they might find out, maybe. A lot of people are insecure in making change. If they discover something and say, well, I'm going to be a lot happier doing this instead of this, what I'm doing right now. But they're scared of making that change. So what do you say to those people to kind of look at those insecurities as essentially insecurities that that they can overcome, or they can choose to overcome them?
Lovely, lovely. I'd like to pick it up firstly with the literature teacher bit, because everyone as a human being has their insecurities. So whether they label it imposter or what they do, and of course the nature nurture thing. What have we brought along with us on our journey? And none of us will have that state of perfection where we've rid ourselves of those. What we learn to do, right, is manage what we have and use our strengths to bring forward the type of behavior that will serve us in this moment and help us counteract some of the behavior that won't. It's not that we're going to get rid of it. But in our book, we do acknowledge the fact of fear. There's a whole chapter called the releasing step. And that is the step where you look at what is it that's perhaps holding me back? What do I need to be released from? And some of that is internal. I need to be released from, that critic on the shoulder. That one, yes, that tells you can't or you shouldn't or you won't. That one.
Who are you?
Who are you to say this? And what do you know? That one. And then the voices outside in the world that want to stop us and keep us, that tall poppy or whatever it is that we have, that we want to level everybody down. So releasing and those strategies are really, coaching ones. Naming the problem for a start, so you know what you're dealing with is one of them. Flipping the below the line thinking. The one that says, I haven't got enough money or time or whatever to do this, to above the, well, how are you spending your time? That just simple, that question of, And the other thing you said too about the vulnerability of facing change and so on. The beautiful thing is, with this book, it's only you and the book. I mean, our road testers were so generous and courageous in sending to us, they're right from their rough notes to their final thing. I was like, we had tearful moments, Justin and I. The beauty of that, of people letting us in that far. But you know what? You don't have to at all. You can sit with yourself, and it's probably not a good idea to try to run away from yourself entirely all the time. Eventually you catch yourself, right? So this is a way, and we, throughout it, the tone of it is, we're one of you, we're with you, we're human too. We feel that we're flawed. And so embracing that self and going, but it's okay. It's okay. The gentleness of that. Come along for your ride and take the bit on you're ready for. Okay. You can add, like you said, we don't do everything just today, do we? Hopefully, with all the best intent, we have tomorrow to continue. Yeah.
Well, one of the dangers of any kind of new undertaking, isn't it? And I mean, I fall into this all the time. Is we kind of build it up. Okay, what needs to happen? Okay, here's all the stuff needs to happen, and here's all the stuff, and here's all the stuff, and then okay, it's so overwhelming. I can never get underway. Whereas all you need to do is, what's the first step?
Well, I love that. That's such a coaching thing to say, Jürgen. I love Mark Bukergo's coaching with the solution focus model, and it is one step. You isolate the one step. He adds a rider, which I love too, and that is make it a great step. And he's got some techniques of how do you ensure that your one step is a great step. And things like don't rely on anyone else to do your step, What seems to be the logical common sense thing, which we're not always logical and commonsensical, are we, in our lives, to put that aside and go, okay, if I'm going to do this, a question like, who else needs to know? Is there someone else going to be affected by me doing this? Well, perhaps I should give them the heads up, that sort of thing. But if you put the one step down, you then build. And if you do, again, the coaching model is to look back and go, look how far I've come, rather than look forward and go, oh, look how far I've got to go. And that will build yourself.
Yes, building the self-confidence, celebrating our success rather than what is it, beating ourselves up over the shortcomings.
Yeah,
So, which is what you said.
every little, yeah,
I should
every
be
little
there,
step.
but I'm only here. So I
Yeah.
beat myself up. But I'm here, and I've come from there. So
Beautiful, and
that's
a lovely
fantastic.
scaling thing they say. Out of 10, where are you now? What would it take to be one more? So I'm 4 out of 10. What would it take to be 5 out of 10? What have you done before that you could do more of? What worked for you before? Could you do more of that? That's the coaching style, which constantly everyone can progress with that style.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I'm just looking at the time, and we could go on talking for ages about this. And we haven't gotten into the process yet, but I will leave that for people to check out the book. So we'll come back to where they can find that and where they can find out about more about My Manifesto in a moment. But I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round of 5 questions.
Lovely.
Same ones that I ask of every guest. And the idea is it's a lightning round. The idea is you'll give us some short, snappy answers and inspire the listener to actually go and do something awesome as a result of your answer.
Great.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Be creative. For Sue, it was playful, but be creative be curious. Follow up your curiosity. Don't shut it down. Who knows what will come out of that?
Yeah. Because a lot of the times people will say, oh, I wonder, why is that like that? Or how does that work? And usually there'll be somebody that says, I don't know, or who cares, even worse. But usually it's I don't know. And that's the end of the conversation. So following up curiosity, even if it's just the most trivial thing, because sometimes that, to me, some of those things actually trigger an idea because I make a connection between that little trivial thing with something that's important to me.
That's it. And children have got it naturally. We just close it down. Let's be childlike.
It's trained out of us.
In
school and in society. Yeah. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Well, I think developing the process with Justin that we needed to live the lives we intended. That's how it started. We took the approach that we want to live intentionally. We want to be the best we can be. So what does that look like? And then when we get that model, offering it to others in a way that they can do it. So satisfy me all the way through the process rather than the outcome. Stay with the process. Do it for yourself. Enjoy it, and then offer it.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about enjoying the process. So it was less focused on the outcome. It was enjoying the process, doing something that served you, and then having in mind, of course, that this is going to serve others as well.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. Favorite resource? Do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Well, how could we go past books? We're talking about one other of my chapters of my life was librarian too. I'm a librarian as well.
Okay.
So books, we have, and we'll provide for our listeners our 50 plus books that we love at the moment. We do a weekly blog as well on our site, and once a month we do a book recommendation. I call it recommendation because we only read the things that or recommend, recommend the things that we love. We don't want to, we're not reviewing as such to eliminate the things not to read. So it's an appraisal of wonderful books of all styles. That's my favorite resource, a daily activity.
Yeah, and of course, as a librarian, you would have had access to lots of books as sort of free. And these days, aren't we lucky because we've kind of got a global library at our fingertips if we go to things like Amazon or Audible or Scribd or those sort of things.
Street libraries, people give out. Yesterday, I picked up 5 books from a street library. Okay. They're everywhere. It's so exciting.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track? I mean, we've talked a little bit about developing the manifesto and then living the manifesto, but what's your recommendation for keeping a client on track if they kind of lose their way a little bit?
Well, in my coaching sessions, I do use that solution focus approach. What I love about that when you're coaching and with a client, I don't see it as the heavy-duty accountability role that I should play as a coach. So, Jürgen, if you've been in a session with me, and I do ensure that when you go away, you have an action you want to do. And I do go through the growth model of when do you think you might do it, and when do you think, have you got to put that like in a diary somewhere, or etc. I do that as part of the growth model. But when you come back, I don't go, well, did you do it? I don't do that.
Yeah.
I love the question, what's better for you now? What's better for you now? And it might have been doing that particular action, or, sometimes the priority for that action might have changed during the course of the session and the next one. Change happens between the sessions, but you'll tell me what's better for you now, and off I'll go. So the track is what's better for you. Yeah.
So you don't set the track, you kind of provide, and it's consistent with the book title, right? Clarity.
Yes,
so you provide clarity on what is the track you want to be going on, or what that's going to serve you best right now.
Exactly. How are you doing with that? Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. And final question of the buzz round. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Well, they could write a book.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Behind being authentic, believing in what they're offering, because I honestly think as a teacher, similarly to now, Jürgen, you sell yourself the whole time. It's if people believe in you and you believe in what you're talking about, then that is authentic. And that is the best thing you can do to be perhaps different from a world where we perhaps feel we're being sold everything all the time. Sold an image, sold a type or a product, which is supposed to do all these things. How about being genuine in yourself and persisting with that despite the setbacks that you might encounter? That's a differentiation I like.
I love it. Yeah. Love it, being authentic. And it sort of says, do that exercise first of knowing yourself, because then then you know what authentic is for you. You know what you typically be, what
exactly.
you're
It's not
being
about
naturally.
things. Yeah, it's not necessarily about things, is it? And I had to learn that, to see the beauty around me, to drop out of that need to strive and do and acquire. And see what's around me and embrace that. And that is the secret to me in many ways for that peace within.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round, and thanks so much for the conversation today. Now, where can people find out more about you and My Manifesto and the book, and maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you've shared today?
All of the above would be wonderful. I will provide you with the details, but Sue at mymanifesto.me is my direct line, and Justin is Justin at mymanifesto.me. We have a website too, mymanifesto.me. We have an Instagram account, My Manifesto. We are on LinkedIn. We would love you to be part of any of our networks, because when the book drops, and now we're looking at April, May, perhaps next year is more realistic apparently for the publishers, then we'd love to say, would you like to know more about it? Would you like to know when it drops? So give us a contact point from you to any one of those would be wonderful. And basically be part of our community, if that's possible. We'd love that, to talk more. So even just like what you said, oh, that's interesting, or let us know when the book's out, or I've got a small business or whatever size business, love to do a version of this for the culture and well-being of my business. We've done a prototype for that now. That's another way we can work with you if you're interested.
Excellent. All right. And we'll, of course, have those links in the show notes so people can click straight through and take up content there if they're interested. And we certainly love some feedback on this conversation, as we would with all of our conversations, of course. And you can do that on the show notes as well. So, Sue, as we wrap up, what action would you like our listener to take away from today's conversation?
The action I'd like them to take away is to believe in themselves. If you have a yearning to do something, do it. To back yourself in and persist in your lives, and through that the rewards will come. For us, I'd love to hear more from you, and any of those links you've just said, that's the action for us. But for yourself, take the journey for you. You won't regret it.
And enjoy the journey and enjoy the process. I'd add to that. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Sue. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Looking forward to many more conversations. I know we've crossed paths in other circles from time to time. And I've really enjoyed today's conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights and your wisdom with us so generously. And I know we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Jürgen. My thanks is to you for allowing me this opportunity. It's been wonderful. Thank you.